You want to go ahead to the next slide, Melissa? Just a little bit of overview. I'm Erin Frisch. I'm the Title 40 director here in Michigan, and I have along with me my assistant administrator, Kim Kearns, who's really been the arms and legs behind our child support payer employment project. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview and then turn it over to her for some of the details. This project started through two paths, really. The first being a couple of prior demonstration projects we have done in the space of child support-led employment services for payers, and had some mixed results, I would say, in terms of success with those programs. So this was building upon that previous work for this next iteration, as well as I had the opportunity to spend a year over the TANF program as well as child support, and got to learn a lot about the job training services program for TANF recipients, and built some connections within our Labor and Economic Opportunity Administration. Once I came back to child support full time, had those relationships available to say, hey, let's try something new. And really have had a great partnership with our workforce development folks. So our program in Michigan is called Learn, Earn, and Provide, or LEAP for short. A quick shout out to our federal partners. They've been incredibly helpful to us during this project, and are grateful for their guidance and support. So our program has 4 prime partners, the first being our office, the Office of Child Support in Michigan. Michigan is a state administered county operated program. And so most of the child support enforcement work happens in the local courts through our county friend of the court offices. And we are in 5 counties with this project. And then the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, or LEO, is the other administrative side that is our counterpart at the state level. And then our workforce development agencies in Michigan are called Michigan Works offices. And so we are partnering with 2 regional offices in this project. So a lot of opportunity to build relationships, and also a lot of opportunity to work through a lot of data sharing agreements, and opportunity to put some of those contracts in place to be able to facilitate this information. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, Erin. Melissa, could you advance to the next slide? All right. So I'm not going to read this slide to you, but it will be up for a while. One of the things that all of the partners realized right from the start was that the sharing of information was going to be vital to the success of our program. The friend of the court offices, the Southwest Michigan Works Regional Office, OCS, and LEO started planning this project in collaboration right from the start. We had a number of subcommittees that discussed various aspects of the process. One of them was the Information Management Subcommittee that really focused in on how information was going to be shared. And we started off sort of broad picture saying, in an ideal world, what would information sharing look like? We envisioned an automated computer system where the workforce development side and the child support side could each enter information. They could each see updates, and they could really communicate and share information about program participants using the same system on an ongoing basis. We knew this was wishful thinking, but it was our ideal. And so we started talking about what type of information we would share in this ideal computer program. And the information that you see here is the information that we identified as ideal. After we came up with our wish list, we invited our Office of Child Support Planning, Evaluation, and Analysis Unit into the conversation because they will be performing the evaluation of our pilot project. And we asked them for some feedback into our list. One of the things that unit suggested was taking a look at our wish list and determining what information is already being gathered by either one of the 4 agencies or by multiple of the 4 agencies, and what information is not being gathered at all at this time point. Once we had that list, we took a look at first the information that is being gathered by multiple agencies. And we had conversations around whether or not we thought that information would match up. So if the friend of the court is gathering address and phone number, and Michigan Works is also gathering address and phone number, are they going to actually have the same address and same phone number? And the answer is probably not. So when we encountered areas of information where more than one agency is gathering that information, we had to come to a decision about whose information do we want to use. And that's where you'll see on our list here that we decided with phone numbers and address that we would utilize the information gathered by friend of the court. We also looked at the information that nobody is gathering and asked if that information is vital and we need to determine a way to gather it, or is it something that would be nice to have, but we can proceed without it. Then we had to get a little more realistic. And we had to start talking about the fact that we probably are not going to start this pilot project with a statewide automated system that will allow all of our agencies to gather this information. It would be ideal, but it would be very labor intensive and very costly, and would by no means be ready by the time that our pilot was ready to kick off. So we had to come up with a plan B. And we spent a lot of time exploring different technology options. We invited representatives from our Department of Technology Management and Budget into our conversations to discuss other options with us. They talked to us about buying off-the-shelf products that would not be as labor intensive as developing our own system, but would still be quite costly. And we would be stuck with whatever information fields were in those products. And we eventually landed on a couple different methods of sharing the information that you see here. One of the things that we had to do was come up with a data share agreement. Our committees landed on which agencies would be sharing which data. We came up with a referral form that the friend of the court office would utilize at the initial referral point. And all of the information that you see in the friend of the court box here is included on that referral form. So our friend of the court offices fill that form out. And because we started in the time of COVID, we had to figure out how we were going to get that form to Michigan Works. We landed on the decision to email the referral form to Michigan Works via encrypted email, and then to have Michigan Works keep a spreadsheet of the referrals that they received. So that was covered in our data share agreement. We then had a conversation with Michigan Works about how are we going to keep track of progress once the person has been referred and has started participation in the program. We signed another data share agreement that allowed our friend of the court staff access to the statewide automated system that Michigan Works utilizes. So our enforcement officers at the friend of the court have view-only access only to the participants in the program that allows them to see any information that Michigan Works enters into their computer system about participant progress. In addition to that, we acknowledged that our enforcement officers may not have the time to regularly check into the statewide automated information system. So we scheduled weekly telephone calls. The weekly telephone calls cover everything that you see on the Michigan Works box here and allow a time to address barriers and to talk about any problems that may have run into, as well as to talk about success stories. And honestly, those success stories, I feel like, are the most important part of the information that we share because they really keep the offices motivated. We also share information on an administrative level between the Office of Child Support and LEO. Those are also done via encrypted spreadsheets that are sent back and forth. Melissa, can you advance to the next slide? So we looked at what our information sharing was going to cost. Like I said earlier, we had decided that we were not going to develop a statewide information system at this point, not only because of the time investment, but also because of the cost. Michigan has 83 counties and we kicked this project off with 4 counties. We're now at 5. So the cost of developing that system with the relatively small number of counties was not realistic for us when we kicked off the pilot. We landed on a decision that costs almost nothing. I don't want to say absolutely nothing because we do have the cost of staff time. But all of the agencies had the encryption software available that they needed. All of the agencies had staff that were able to use Excel spreadsheets and did not need additional training on how to develop the spreadsheets that we share. So the cost of that was relatively low and initially did not cost us anything. As time goes on and we increase in the number of participants in the program, staff are spending more and more time updating the spreadsheets, but they're also seeing the value in it. So there is the cost of the personnel time it takes for them to do that. There were some staff that really struggled with learning how to encrypt and decrypt documents. So that took a little bit of time, but they really do all feel that it's worthwhile. And also the weekly telephone calls. We have one county that is really surpassing the others in the number of participants and spends more time on those telephone calls than the others do. So again, you know, that's a use of our staff time where they could be doing other things, but that verbal communication that we have has been invaluable, and staff don't want to stop having those calls. A lot of questions that wouldn't be asked via email or information that wouldn't be shared via email or via the spreadsheet is being shared in those discussions. So not incredibly expensive, definitely shocking compared to the cost of some of the other information management methods that we looked at, but it gets the job done. So we made sure that when we started inviting more counties, when we added our 5th county to the pilot, we made sure to emphasize to that county that we would be having those weekly phone calls, we would be sharing that information. And again, as they've run into problems and as they've encountered situations that they don't know quite how to handle. It's really been valuable for them, not only for the friend of the court and Michigan Works to talk to each other, but also to have the administrative offices on the calls as well. Frequently, the questions are for OCS or for Leo regarding what exactly policy will allow and what it will not allow. So I believe that is all that I had for today, Chad.
Thank you so much, Kim and Aaron, for sharing that example from Michigan. I'd like to turn it over to Ruth Ann Thornton, the director in Texas, to talk about how they're tackling this issue.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being with us today. Happy to be with this incredible group. And it's always so interesting when we get to come together and talk about walking similar paths with different challenges and exploring those similarities. I'm with me today is Troy Martin. He is the division chief for field support in the Texas Office of the Attorney General Child Support Division. He has a really unique perspective on this program, having grown up in the field, as we call it, in child support in Texas. He has interacted with this program on the front lines as an office manager, as a regional director, and now in his role in his division chief position, his group oversees the statewide coordination and support of the program in its operational state. So I'm really grateful to have him here with me today. And like Aaron, I'm going to kind of tee this up and explain what NCP Choices is and then hand it off to him, because he's really the best suited to speak to some of the inner workings and the mechanics that we're here to talk about today. So just to back up a little bit, the NCP Choices program originated through like Michigan, we have traveled a similar path. It started with experimentation and grant-funded programs, excuse me. And back in 2005, we partnered with the Texas Workforce Commission and the 4D courts to implement the program, specifically, as you all know, to address the problem of inconsistent, unreliable support by our paying parents who had unstable work histories. In the early years of the program, it was funded through the Texas Workforce Commission using a portion of its TANF block grant funding. And during those early years, program services were really focused on non-custodial parents or paying parents associated with a current or former TANF or Medicaid custodial parent household. The model, a little bit later on, I think in 2010, we started investing child support incentive funds through an incentive waiver from the Office of Child Support Enforcement. So plug to our federal partners who are also incredible in helping us through the navigating the changes and the changing and evolving needs of this population and of this program. We receive a limited amount of authority to invest incentive funds. And what that really enabled us to do is move beyond just that assistance population to being able to open up program services to any paying parent with a child support obligation, not just public assistance child support cases. The model's pretty simple. There's a lot of words on that screen and you all can read, so I won't, and that's not really what we're here to dive into as much today. So I'll leave you with what's on the screen, but it is pretty straightforward. We each one of these pillars, each one of these program partners, we do what we do best. The OAG, our program, the Child Support Division, we identify eligible paying parents, the court orders them into the program, and workforce eliminates employment barriers. And that's pretty much that. A key factor, though, to the program's historical success, it really has been, I'm somewhat tongue-in-cheek about that, but a key factor of our success has really been leveraging the strength of each one of those partners. The individualized job services provided by the local workforce centers and the enhanced child support compliance and monitoring activities administered by our program has really allowed the program to mature over the last, at this point, 17 years, and now offers services in, I think, Troy, keep me honest here, 21 out of 28 workforce development board service areas, which covers in a state as large as Texas, to break that down a little more simply, about 80% of the state's population. I'm going to hand it over to Troy here to talk about the technical side of our partnership with Texas Workforce Commission, which is COLTS, or Choices Online Tracking System. Wonderful Texan name there. And but before I do, I would also be remiss if I didn't credit a couple of people whose vision and hard work made NCP Choices and COLTS the successful model that they remain today. You guys may know, and I think think he's might be even on the line, Michael Hayes, who's now with OCSC, and Noelita Lugo, both of whom I think have who both moved on from their time in the Texas program, but left a lasting legacy through this program in particular. So Troy, take it away.
Yes, ma'am. Thank y'all for allowing me on this call. And I really enjoy following Ruth Ann, and I don't enjoy it as well. So we're going to go to the next slide for people who have eyesight like mine. I want to walk through this a bit more carefully. I did kind of grow up with this program. I was a managing attorney in a small field office in Beaumont, Texas, when this guy flew in from Austin named Michael Hayes and said, "Have I got a deal for you?" And I've been making these deals for a long time now. And so having grown up next to the program, to supervising the program, I do have an interesting perspective. And having moved to different communities and different workforce boards in Texas, it does work a little differently. So it is a partnership between our two main agencies. Texas Workforce also has an overseeing board statewide and then local board engagement. As Ruth Ann outlined very clearly, we try to do court orders. We can also do some administrative orders that the judges also sign to enroll NCPs into this program. The kickoff for us for our technology link is our workforce partners actually start in the database and put in the customer's information after they receive the court order. Traditionally, and I'm going to try to speak in the pre-COVID and post-COVID world, and I hope everybody on the call understands how hard that transition has been for all of us. In the pre-COVID world, where I was an attorney who actually practiced law, we would physically hand off customers in the courtroom. We would have a workforce partner there to receive them with a hearty handshake, and sometimes even got them jobs by the close of business that day. But in any case, we wanted to get an onboarding with them and really start the process of integrating the non-custodial parent into a work system. And so that worked really well. Post-COVID, we've had to make one or two adjustments. And so we do the handoffs virtually in many cases. We have a slightly less sticky rate, for my favorite term, of getting NCPs back into the program, because virtually you just don't have that hearty handshake and warmth. But that's how it works. Once the COLTS database has received the information from our workforce partners, it matches with our case management system. And so I'll try to keep it as acronym free as I can. Many of you also work in child support programs, so we will all speak our own version of Greek or Latin or whatever you speak. So I hope for the slides will have enough explanation. If we can go on to the next slide, I'll try to explain that one next. All right, COLTS. Thank you, Ruth Ann, for naming it properly. NCP Choices Online Tracking System. We actually communicate live with each other. So it's a pretty unique program from that standpoint. Basically, if an NCP makes a payment, it processes through the child support system. Our workforce partners can see that payment. As Michigan outlined earlier, we're all not staring at the same screen at the same time. So that live update, we're not waiting for it to ding and show us that information, but it's there when we look. We also have, it's a secure database. It requires user passwords, acceptance. There's a training program. It's pretty significant. It's also traceable. One of the things we learned with this was not to overwrite existing data with new data. So it basically is a database that builds on each other, creates a separate record for every event, and makes it so as a managing attorney, I can pull a history of case records. As a workforce partner, they can pull a history of appointments and payments and really see growth over time or challenges over time. So we found that was significant. We also want to cut down the data entry. If you're a data nerd like I am, every time I hit a keystroke, I type one just a little off. And so we really wanted to reduce that complexity for our staff, try to automate as much of the matching as we could, try to put the systems in as we can to make sure that all data is aligned to all our partners simultaneously. And again, this is an accessible database to both workforce and OAG staff. We have minimal requirements, a training program, and secure connections required to access it. And it is accessible through the web. So when we did transition post-COVID, we did not have to limber up too many different things because, as Ruth Ann shared, we're in 80% of our population in Texas. We were already working remote in some ways with our partners. Next slide, please. All right. When you log into COLTS, and this is from the participant perspective, the non-custodial parent perspective, there's basically a summary of data for each person, excuse me. I'm jealous of Michigan's details. I had to limit it because I can't memorize all those facts. So we do have what the local workforce partner or the region the NCP was enrolled in. We keep their address and contact information shared between both parties. Both parties can update that, and then we'll talk about what happens at that point. We also want to put where the office for our site is housed. We have 81 physical locations throughout the state of Texas, and sometimes it's a bit puzzling for me to keep track of where everybody is and who reports to what. And we also want to keep the date we ordered them into the program. That order entry date is very important to both see the changes in payments over time and really determine, did we have an impact on this customer and on the children of this family? We also try to keep track of the type of order. In our case, primarily, we started as enforcement only. I'm an old prosecuting attorney, nothing better than I like than contempt. Now that's changed over time with ability to pay and learning about better ways to encourage payments. And so we do also enroll in the establishment side. And so we do want to track those two results differently because they are different processes. Next slide, please. All right. There are some significant data sharing benefits. I alluded to them earlier. I'm going to get a little more specific now, and I'm sure y'all will find the weaknesses in my arguments and ask questions at the end. We have a system where it sends updates to our staff. In other words, if the workforce has a new address to update, it updates in Colts, but it doesn't automatically update in our child support management system. We did that for a variety of reasons. We partner with a lot of different data sets from a lot of other state agencies, and sometimes the data can be, in Troy's world, one digit off. And so we didn't want to create that extra complexity and extra transactions in the system. We did want to capture this second point, which may be the reason why the program exists. When new employment information is created, it's a separate email with a separate record so that we can immediately go into the case management system and issue any automated withholding orders, validate the employer, make follow-up calls, and really expedite the contact between the customer saying, hey, I have a job, and us saying, well, I've got a deal for you, here's a withholding order. So closing that gap in a timely manner seemed important to us, and we're fortunate that Colts does a really good job of stimulating that on our side. Next slide, please. All right, now we've been doing this for a while. Ruth Ann and I were talking offline, and having grown up with this, there's so much I want to change and she wants to change and we want to do differently. And the post-COVID world or mid-COVID world, depending on where you are, there's a lot we all want to change. I will say this, one of the critical elements to our success is ensuring that we do both software and case management on both agencies all the time. All of us have turnover in staff, all of us have adaptations to processes, and just ensuring that continuity of how the mechanisms work and how we can get creative with the mechanism was very important. Michigan hit on it. We've been doing it a long time. The Texas workforce partner in Beaumont, Texas, I started with, she and I saw each other in court every Thursday, and we had a conversation. And she's, Troy, I need you to do this. This guy ain't doing this, go file it. And so we always maintain communication outside the platform. It's critical to the success of both programs. And so now virtually, we're fortunate in Texas. Our partner does also have Microsoft Teams, as we do. Now we have to navigate IT barriers. We are able to conduct calls with them on a weekly basis between the local board and the local office. We also have monthly calls, and we also have regional calls in which the state partners join in those. The outside communication part is important, not just to discuss the challenges, but the success stories. That's one of the challenges when I was in the Dallas office, like, hey, how did we do? What's a good thing that happened out of this program? And so those offline calls really can motivate and connect people back to the data sharing where I live. We also want to make sure the next appropriate actions are taken responsibly. We all receive a variety of emails and inputs, and everything's number one priority sometimes, depending how you've been managed or managed. And so ensuring that we prioritize the work properly and feeling open to hear when we didn't do it as well as others. So having that blessed partner in Beaumont, Texas, hey, Troy, you didn't respond to my email. Oh yeah, I'll get right to it. So I think that's important as well. One of the things we also had to learn, and for those of us who've been doing this a while, we've learned it much to our chagrin. Once you hit enter, it's stuck in the system. It creates a great record of a point in time. And so if you're like me and your typing fingers get ahead of your brain and you mistype something, well, that typo is there for a bit and they're not edible after submission. So we try to make that point in our training sessions with partners on both sides and we try to ensure that we are appropriately communicating inside a permanent record of both agencies. Believe it or not, Ruth Ann, I think that's the bulk of our slides, and I'm going to turn it over to you to discuss other lessons we might have learned.
Thank you for going through that, Troy. And I so value your perspective from kind of almost the inception of this program through, all of the turbulence and the changes of the last couple of years. Troy alluded to kind of a need for some reimagination on our part. And it's due to a lot of things. The hybrid world that we find ourselves living in, changing expectations, an interesting economy that we're certainly finding ourselves in now. And we're in a hopefully post-COVID and certainly a quasi-post-contempt world. The enforcement dockets where our customers used to be enrolled in this program or ordered into this program were often mass contempt dockets, 50, 75 cases on a docket, and you'd have a very busy workforce partner potentially in that space. But we're really, as everybody is, reevaluating the appropriate use of contempt and the practical impact and value of contempt. So, one of the things I love about this program, and kind of back to what's made it successful, is that everybody does what they're best at. But this program serves the intersection of what two really important economic support social service agencies provide within the sphere of each program's essential intent and our purpose. And our purpose is consistent support for children. The workforce program's purpose is to empower economic mobility and to connect under or unemployed parents or just citizens with job services. And so by leveraging the overlap between those two purposes and essential intent, we've been able to make a really incredible difference for, at this point, a really long time for a lot of people. Now we're in a stage, and I did promise Chad not to completely hijack his webinar, but we're in a stage where we've got to go back to the drawing board and rethink some things and figure out how do we promote that same level of engagement that we experienced with the contempt stick and figure out how to promote that further upstream. We have experimented and we have experience with enrollment at the establishment phase, but it wasn't the same. And so we're in a space of reimagination right now, and really look forward to learning together with with everybody else on this call and across the country who are struggling with some of these same challenges. So thanks. Back to you, Chad.
Thank you. Excellent thoughts that you shared there, Ruth Ann. And it is a really exciting time and a time of opportunity in my mind for our child support programs to really pivot when you're using these strategies and trying to combine those with the new ways of looking at contempt and screening and all that. So excellent presentation, Texas. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bob Patrick out of Pennsylvania to talk to us about what he's got going on over there and solving this issue. Bob, take it away, please.
All right, thanks, Chad. Good afternoon. I've talked to some of you, maybe quite a few of you, about our Job Gateway component, but probably not in this context in terms of automation. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about our business problem we had in Pennsylvania, and then a little bit about our solutions, specifically how data sharing and automation can be applied to the field of employment and training, where it's traditionally a caseload management heavy system and costly. So first, our business problem, probably very similar to all of yours. We had, at any given time, we had about 18,000 cases with no employment on record in the last 90 days. Those cases represented about $3.8 million in missed payments during that time, but they also represented about $90 million in arrears that were owed. So you can go to the next screen, Chad. So our solution to this, our requirements for the project, and forgive me if I read some of this, we want to create a full service employment training component within child support, meaning it wasn't just a referral system to workforce or to a contractor or something else. We wanted it contained within child support. we want to do so at minimal cost. I've been accused of being cheap, but we did want to do it at minimal cost without duplicating the efforts of other programs like Workforce and TANF. We wanted it to have minimal workload impact on our child support enforcement officers. I like what Ruth said earlier, is let people do what they do best, something like that. But we wanted to make it not a burden on our folks who were doing enforcement on our side of things. And we wanted to provide the services the way that our clients needed to do job search. And by that, I mean, job search is very different in 2022 than it was even 10 years ago. Everything's online. People apply online, they interview online, they submit videos with their applications. There's all kinds of things that are so different now. And also we wanted to improve the outcomes for the families and be able to increase collections on these 18,000 cases without taking the time, effort, funds, et cetera, where we would sacrifice quality in other areas. So in other words, putting all our attention or a lot of attention on employment training and taking it off of our bread and butter. So anyway, these were our requirements. Almost universally, everyone said that is ridiculous. That is impossible. And that's pretty much what they said for the first couple of years while we were working on this. And I want to just say something quick. We already had a traditional employment training program in Pennsylvania that we called NEON, but it was, by traditional, I mean, it's a program you report to in person, it's case management intensive, and it's very expensive. It's very successful, but it's very expensive. And you can't, well, I'll speak for Pennsylvania. We could not scale up that type of program across all counties. When you're talking about costs of like $3,500 to $7,500 per enrollment. So our NEON program is restricted to our largest jurisdictions. It's also capped at 1,000 enrollments per year, and it's focused on people with significant barriers. Most often that means ex-offenders. And it's very successful. It has a 75% placement rate every year, and that's with hard to place. So that kind of placement rate is significant. And but to expand it, we really had an obligation to expand it beyond those jurisdictions to anyone who needed a job. We were enforcing those orders, but we didn't necessarily have a path in place for them to get a job. So anyway, a different model was necessary. We didn't want to stop NEON, but we needed a different model to add to that service component, and automation was critical to that. So what that took was a partnership, as I mentioned, where we don't just refer, but we also actively manage or co-manage employment training activities with those partners. And we wanted to be able to offer the full range of employment training services, job training, education, ESL, GED, job development, resume workshops, all everything you can think of. It had to have the full array of tools for people to use. So anyway, that takes me to the next slide, please, Chad. We started with the data sharing considerations. First consideration is fairly obvious. Where is this kind of work done now? The answer in most states is it's done in Workforce under WIOA. And same thing in Pennsylvania. It was done by our Department of Labor and Industry, and they're very good at it. And then the second question in terms of data sharing was, what does WIOA say about partner access? And I think it's very clear that child support falls into employment services as a partner in WIOA. But beyond that, what do your state regulations say about it? Say about cooperation across agencies, say about data sharing, say about program, linkages across workforce. What does it say about data sharing, and what agreements are already in place with that agency? So there's a lot of considerations going into data sharing. And when I say what agreements are already in place, for example, your state may already have an agreement with labor to do your new hire reporting. We did, so we already had an agreement. It saved us in terms of creating a framework to share information, especially on sharing on this employment interface. It might help you in finding a funding mechanism for your project. And if you already have a data sharing agreement, you probably already have file exchanges. You probably have a secure tunnel for integration between the two agencies. So that if those things exist, it's really best to know about that ahead of time. And beyond those considerations, for the purpose of this call, for my friends in child support, I wanted to talk about 4 things which I thought were so important in getting this deal done with labor. And the first thing to consider is you have to understand what they do. And this is important, not in general terms, but in detail. What are their workflows? What are their rules? What are their program offerings? What's on their website? How do people connect? What are the eligibility criteria and all that? It takes a lot of homework to understand them. And then secondly, as Michigan mentioned, you have to understand what data they have. This is important because, I know what all of you probably want in a data exchange with another agency. It's the same as us. You want everything. What do you have? Well, we want that. And I have to tell you, that's usually a non-starter in terms of data sharing agreements with other agencies. So the second point is figure out what they have, and then figure out what your bottom line is. What exactly must you have to make this employment and training component work for you? Because you might have to settle just for that. So you got to know what I have to have and what's your bottom line. If you can get more, that's great, but you may not be able to. And the next one, the third one, would be, what clients do you already have in common? And this is something that I researched ahead of time because I knew the question was going to come up from Department of Labor of us adding work to them, us, dumping our responsibilities on them. And even though they're the workforce agency. So in preparation for that, we did a data match. We had 80,000 child support defendants who were already registered and using this online job gateway system under Department of Labor. And I had that number ready. And when it came up, it only came up once. I never heard about it again. It was over. Because they knew these were already their clients. Anybody we sent was already using their services. And then the fourth thing that I would tell you in terms of trying to get a data sharing agreement, the fourth thing that's important is to understand what their performance standards are in workforce. So just like we're always thinking about our performance standards in child support, you have to understand what makes them tick over on the workforce side. And on our side, that helped us explain our co-management style, explain how that was going to help, and help drive some of their performance improvement that they were looking for. And you have to understand them all. You have to understand youth and veteran and dislocated workers and what their high priority enrollments are and so on. It's all in this. It's all going to be in their state plan for workforce, but it's also in WIOA, and you have to do a lot of preparation. And I would say, I think you have to know them to be a good partner to them. And so that was kind of the preparation. And I was ready for all those questions. And the first time we met, everybody agreed that we could share all that data. that WIOA said we could, state regs said we could share all that information. And we could do the file exchange in real time, and the financial agreements were all ready to go. And then it took 18 more months from the point where we all agreed on day one to actually get the memorandum of understanding nailed down. And so I bring all that up just to say, when I talk to a lot of states about an automated connection and co-management with labor, it usually falls apart when they say it'd be impossible for us to get that data sharing agreement. We've tried, it just doesn't work. So that's why I kind of bring up that in detail. So anyway, 2 years into the planning, 18 months after we all agreed, we had an agreement. And I will say during those 2 years, our IT department tried to kill it. Our budget office, our department, they all tried to kill the project repeatedly because they said it looked like it was stalled out. They had a fit about keeping it in the APD for 3 consecutive years. We're trying to work on it. And thank you to OCSC. We explained what the holdup was, but we thought it was worthwhile to keep it on the radar. And anyway, what we ended up with was a connection between the child support system and the Department of Labor Job Gateway system, a direct real-time interface between the two systems. And we can co-manage every individual in that system in all their employment activities. We can see all their activities on the child support side, and it allowed us to manage those activities from the courts, track compliance, track outcomes, send text messages, run performance projects, and manage it in our normal child support performance dashboard for workers. So, and for workforce, they were able to manage these cases the same way on their side in their existing system. It didn't look any different. And Chad, if you go to the next page, I won't tell you too much about how it works. It's an automated online system through Workforce that you can also participate in person. You can connect to training and job search and all kinds of workforce related services, but so much of it is available online. And Chad, you can go to the next slide, please. You can connect through our mobile app. You can connect through our child support website, and all of our activities. And this is where automation really is handy. For anybody who's ever run a job program, you can probably remember all the manual tracking of job applications, job search activities. How many places did you go to apply? How many places did you interview? What are your school hours? What's your attendance? All that stuff is very labor intensive. But in this system, everything's done through this shared system. And the system of record is the job gateway where all these hours are housed. But the tracking of all those activities is automated. It just populates in our system to show us what people are doing. It's verified as they do it, so we don't have follow-up verifications. It's also tied into our new hire notifications. So, it's all wrapped up nice and neat in terms of efficiency. And that was the point of this really big shift from traditional employment training to automation, is to really cut out the hours spent on paper, on chasing people to see what they did, on people having to come in and drop stuff off. All that stuff is eliminated. So anyway, it's all automated for us. It's all automated for the participants. And you can go to the next one, please, Chad. This is a screenshot of what it would look like on our side. So we'd be able to look, or rather on the participant side. And as they're doing activities, you can see by the day, by the week, by the month, it will show all their activities they've done ongoing, and it will all be documented. You can drill down on this activity and see, exactly where did they apply, exactly what resume did they attach. And that's helpful if they're not getting a job. We might see that there's some work to be done there, or they need to look at a different industry sector, to be honest with you. But this is what it would look like on their side. Chad, if you go to the next screen, this is what it looks like on our side. It's just a summary page of their job search activities. And these are fictitious names, but it just shows us the same kind of the same data. How many applications, how many jobs have they looked at, how many have they applied for, how many employer contacts, job fairs, education. A lot of the education hours come up under other, but then we can drill down and see exactly what those hours were. And it's all in real time. So that's a lot of the efficiency on the view of what we see, and our ability to manage it on the child support side without the legwork of all the paper and all the phone calls and checking with employers and so on. Oh, and I should also say it's part of the automation is it's almost seamless for our participants. And by that, I mean, they can do things on the child support website. They can do stuff on the Job Gateway site. And it really doesn't matter where they're coming into the system. They can do everything they need to do really with one sign-on. And one of the funny things that happened early is I heard a complaint, and I thought it was terrific. The complaint was, I really can't tell what system I'm in. I can't tell if I'm in child support. I can't tell if I'm in workforce. It's just not clear. And I said, that's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. And, it's so seamless. Like you could be on your child support page looking at your, payment schedule or updating an address or something like that. And you'll have a pop-up that says that a job has just come up in your search criteria. And you can click on that. You can see what the job is. You can click a second time and upload the resume you want to use. And you can click a third time and you've applied for that job and you've never left the child support website and you're done. It's that quick. And those of you who have been following the job market, stuff's getting filled that quick. So if you can see it that fast and apply, you've got an advantage in the job market. But Chad, you can go to the next screen, please. So this is just, anyway, I'll just say there's a lot to the system. There's some quick screenshots and kind of a vague description of how it works, but there's a lot to the components. There's a lot to how we use it. There's a lot to the options that the clients have. But the point of today's discussion was automation and how we linked it to this other agency. And this last slide, I just simply wanted to show you that, well, I told you everybody said it was ridiculous. And these are our outcomes. In year one, which was crossed over 2018-19, we had almost 6,500 participants enrolled. We had about $1 million in monthly support from the job placements, which were over 2,700 job placements. And it was only costing us about $37 per job placement. So it was incredibly efficient. It was productive. And in terms of the cost, we really kept a lid on the costs. And then I'll just say, in today, last year we had over 7,100 enrolled. We had almost 5,500 job placements. That's a roughly 77% placement rate. And we're collecting $2 million in support from these efforts. And if you look at that in terms of an enforcement remedy, this is one of our highest producing enforcement remedies. Strangely enough, all of our highest producing enforcement remedies are really non-punitive. So you have income attachment, which I'm not sure even counts as an enforcement remedy anymore. That's always number one. But text messaging is number two, and Job Gateway is number 3 in terms of collections per year. And those are our outcomes. So it's really fully automated. It doesn't add a lot of work to our enforcement officers. It's not a burden on Department of Labor. Their performance has gone up as well. It's very cost effective. And our partnership with labor has really been strengthened over this. So, and I will tell you, when we started, I told you I was a little offended when they said how ridiculous it was. But when we started winning awards for it, like the Governor's Award for Excellence, I did my best not to be petty and rub it in. I remained petty on the inside, but I didn't really get into it with the naysayers. But it's really, in our state, it's really a model now for how we can change employment services to allow folks who are able to do so in a more automated online fashion to do it that way. You're still going to have the case management intensive barrier remediation type programs, but everybody doesn't need that level of program and that cost of a program. So, I'll admit I had a chuckle when it worked after hearing a lot of grief. But anyway, Chad, that's about it. That's kind of the background on the data sharing and how you get it done. It's not easy, but it's really worth it. And in terms of costs, we only pay $66,000 a year to maintain the interface, and we can enroll as many people as we want. At this point in 2022, it costs us about $13 to get somebody a job in this system. You know, it costs about, I'm also the director of the TANF program. It costs about $10,000 to get somebody a job in TANF with all the contract costs. So it's working. I don't want to say it's on cruise control, but it's really working, and I don't see it stopping.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you again to Michigan and to Texas. We're going to get into some questions and answers here in a second. I really, this Knowledge Works effort is really peer-to-peer knowledge transfer, peer-to-peer learning, as I'm sure many of you have gathered. We're really just the conduit for this. So hopefully you've heard, during the course of these 3 presentations, varying levels of, some of them had more cost, more time intensive upfront, but less workload impact on the back end. And some were reverse of those, right? Some of them had lot less work, a lot less costs on the front end, but a little more work on the back end. Hopefully you're finding in there some ranges that you can think about in your child support employment program, or the one that you will begin operating someday. I also hope you really heard that last point that Bob was making there. It is really interesting to think we can have a couple different tiers of this based on people's needs that they bring to the table, and not everybody needs that heavy touch. Some of them can get a much lighter touch and get to where they need to go. I have a couple of questions before I get into the 2 questions I'd like to pose to our panel members. Melissa, do you either want to highlight any of the questions and answers that have been going on in the chat, or any questions in the chat that haven't been answered yet?
So there was one question that came in the chat, and I believe that Texas has already answered that. That was about whether the Texas program was for paying or non-paying NCPs, and Troy has answered that was majority are all non-paying. It is NCPs that are underemployed or unemployed. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. I would like to take this time as just a reminder. If you can raise your hand, we will call on you for questions, or you can enter those into the chat. I would also add, for those of you that are by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. Same feature will lower your hand. *9 toggles your hand up and down, and *6 can be used for unmuting as well if you're by phone. Chad, I'll let you ask your questions now.
Thank you, Melissa. I think a couple of you touched on this. Maybe everybody could speak to this. Do you notice that your income withholding orders are in place much more quickly, more efficiently through these processes, as opposed to your normal quarterly wage and other processes that you find that information when you're running these programs?
I'll jump in from Texas. This is Troy. I don't know that it's any faster. It appears to be about the same. We have a pretty good automated system, and we're able to send withholding orders. Just like Bob said, it's the first enforcement remedy that no one even thinks of it as a remedy anymore. So we're able to flurry those out pretty quickly. What it does change is it changes the customer base with employment to send those upon. And so I think growing that customer base, it is much faster than waiting for a quarterly update or anything else. Getting it from the customer as they talk to a workforce partner or as they talk to a child support employee, I think that does change it. But overarching, the automateds are so fast anyway, I think it just increases the pool in which we can send those.
Great point, Troy. Others want to speak to that?
Yeah, Chad, I agree with Troy. The interfaces are so fast. The only thing we get a little bit faster is on the activity. So for instance, on the activity, if we know somebody has an offer of a job, we'll know about the job offer before it comes up on new hire because they haven't, been onboarded yet for the new job. So we'll know that their hours of activity are probably going to tail off because they have an offer to start next week or the week after, something like that.
Michigan, anything to add?
No, I think our experience is very similar.
Thank you. Thank you. You all shared lessons learned. Is there one top thing you could point to that you know now that you wished you knew before you started down this road? And what would that top thing be? If you had to pick one thing you wished you knew before you got started that you know now.
Chad, does it have to be specific to data sharing?
No.
Well, then I would say for us in Michigan, it has been a real challenge culturally for our local offices, which are court-based, to get their heads around an employment program as an enforcement tool. And I had underestimated just how much of a cultural challenge that would be. And conceptually, I think they understand it, but the mechanics of how to make it work, for some of my local offices, they just, show cause is what they got and show cause is what they do. And when show cause went away, they just sort of went, I don't know what to do now. I would say I wish I had known then just what a change management cultural change effort we had to make. And now that we do know it, as we think about a statewide program, one of the things we're doing is we're going to do like a speed dating session with our local front of the court office directors and the Michigan Works agencies, so that they start to build relationship and understand what each one does and how they can help each other.
Thank you for that,
I'd like to
Aaron.
echo, sorry, I'd
Please.
like to echo that because I'm a reformed prosecutor as well. And Michael Hayes had to convince me of better ways to do things because jail was the only option in my little attorney brain. And so you are entering a relationship in which everybody didn't sign up for it. And so having local partners that develop and build a good relationship is significantly more important than the data that tracks all their activity. Because what we found in all the locations we have, the best locations have willing partners on both sides, and that communication just flows seamlessly. At any point when we have changes in staffing or upsets, sometimes we can get a misalignment that happens, and that actually has an impact upon the customers and the employment rates. And that takes a while to rebuild. So it's a program about relationships, even if it's just a data program. I think Bob outlined that as well.
Excellent points. We have a few minutes, about 5 minutes remaining. Melissa, would you let us know, are there any other questions out there in the audience?
It's silence in the audience today. So again, if you want to ask a question, I do have one that just came in. Is participation court ordered in Michigan?
Yes, and voluntary both.
Thank you, Erin. Pennsylvania, same question to you. Is it court ordered?
Yeah, it's similar to what Aaron said. It's court ordered in most cases, and but you could do so as a volunteer, and we can also do so for the custodial parents if they're looking to find a better job or find a job.
You know, that's a great point. Troy weighed in on the eligibility criteria in response to that one question. The other states, please share your full eligibility criteria for these approaches.
So eligibility criteria for us, Kim probably could answer better than I could for the details. But I gotta say, just a shout out, Bob, to mentioning that parents receiving support can also use these programs. I'm a big proponent that we have an obligation to support both parents in finding stable employment and better employment. And so just a go you and go Pennsylvania for recognizing that it can be both parents. Kim, you're on mute.
Is that better? Michigan doesn't have a lot of eligibility criteria. We require participants, because it's a pilot program in only 5 counties. Participants have to have a friend of the court case in one of the 5 counties and also live in one of the 5 counties. For the LEAP program, it does have to be a non-custodial parent. They do not have to be in arrears. They have to be at risk of or currently behind in their payments. We want to include at risk in there because if we can prevent somebody from getting behind, we would like to do that. Unemployed or underemployed and legally allowed to work.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks to our state presenters again. The states are our most important partners in this effort. Obviously, we couldn't do any of this without you helping each other and your peers learn from your experiences. I want to plug pretty soon on our Knowledge Works website. We will have a new training opportunity announced for enhanced child support services for non-custodial parents participating in these programs. That webinar will occur on September 9th at 1:30 to 2:45 p.m. Eastern. Please check back on our website in the coming weeks for registration opportunities for that webinar. Once again, I thank everyone for joining today and thank our state partners most of all. Thank you, and we'll see you at the next Knowledge Works webinar. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. I did load into the chat feature the slides for today. I will work to get those sent out to all registrants as well next week.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, everyone.